Hello Gobs, and welcome to another video, bringing more RPG horror stories at you again. Check that disclaimer at the beginning of the video. As always, these stories may or may not be real. That is up for you to decide and me to try to guess sometimes. Sometimes they sound crazy, but I'm just stupid. And even if they are fake, I think it's still a fun hypothetical situation to throw yourself into to see how you would have reacted differently. So as always, if you would have acted differently, comment down below. And let's get these stories on a roll. Our first story comes from the user Redhead101101. Is that binary for something? Regardless, the horror story that never was, or how I dodged this guy's horrible encounter design. TLDR. This guy complains. It's a very short story. I don't think. Whatever. TLDR. That guy complains that no one wants to play in this game that requires you to make min-max builds at level 1 that fights encounters that would make Tomb of Horrors look balanced. Jesus, sounds horrible already. But if a group agrees to a min-max campaign, then go by golly have your min-max campaign. Don't expect people to have fun in a min-max campaign. I mean, I'm sure some DMs can make it fun, but I've never seen it. I haven't seen it work yet, so let's continue. Does anyone have stories of games they almost joined until they saw the biggest red flags and noped out of there? Yeah, guys, let me know. Comment below. Give me something. Moving on. For me, it was in my college dorm, and there was this guy who was a stereotypical dat guy. Never showered, never washed his hands. The RA had to force him to throw away his trash, etc. I was hanging out with friends in the common area talking about D&D, and he came over and started talking about how he loves D&D and has a super epic campaign he's been building for like 5 years, but he can't find people to play. My friends and I tried to have sympathy and thought maybe we shouldn't judge a book by its cover and listen to his pitch. It was bad. He starts off with, I designed this game for 3.5. You know, real D&D. Okay, this is starting to sound... Normally, I can't tell if something sounds fake, but this is starting to sound fake. I'm not gonna point any fingers. Like, again, if it's a hypothetical situation. If it's real, I would've just talked to a nerd, okay? We don't talk to nerds around here. We talk to geeks, okay? Get your facts straight. He starts off with, I designed this game for 3.5, you know, real D&D. But no one would play in it, so I had to change it to Pathfinder. But everyone wants to play this 5e thing, which ain't even real D&D, so I converted it again. He follows it up with, you don't have to min-max, but if you don't, you'll die in the first 15 minutes because the first encounter is against a bunch of CR26 creatures that deal damage and exhaustion and... He continues on describing in great detail what sounds like most BS Tombs of Horror levels encounters. Needless to say, my friend and I were suddenly busy, and he was encouraged to move off campus when I told the RA that later that year he had been trying to spy on me through my... This sounds fake, right? Guys, what am I supposed to comment on it? There's nothing here! All this just sounds fake. If it's real, he did the right decision. CR26 creatures at level 1. I mean, I guess just avoid it. That's it. Moving on. Our next, hopefully not fake story comes from the user Wrong Kami. I love TTRPGs. I hate TTRPG gamers. Let's see what they have to say. This is going to be more of a rant based on my experience, but I have to say it somewhere in here. Much of the stereotypes about TTRPG gamers are true. I've left one of my gaming tables because of this. Now I'm looking for a new one and, my god, why can't you guys just be flippin' normal for once? I can understand it in the 90s, early 2000s, when this was so niche. Only the weirdest of weirdos like this hobby. I was 15 at the time, of course, I was a weird kid. But gosh flippin' darn it, you've had the entire time to grow up, where I've been born in a time where RPGs are becoming mainstream. The flip is your excuse now. How can a grown, 30-plus son of a... this guy... I think this person might be on a rant, guys. I don't know. asked me to be a Mel Cobbin with the child flaw whose derangement is nymphomania. How could I find people who still can't hold a conversation for more than 10 minutes and not struggle to retain information from the beginning of the same conversation? How come when I come to a new table I have to struggle for people to look me in the eye and say, "Hi, welcome to our table. Do you guys really think it's better to huddle over each other, hunching and looking at your character sheets, and mumble a hey towards my general direction? Do you think it's welcoming to play in a L5R as a new player who doesn't know the setting and give me side-eye because my character is dishonorable? Do you think it's flippin' normal that I always have to be the one ordering pizzas because you can't talk to the cashier? What happened to this guy? What happened to you, man? Like, do you think I will think highly of you when your flatmate passes by the kitchen? You come closer and you say, "You see that piece of butt? I have tapped that." No, you haven't, Steve. No, you flippin' haven't, because she's looking at us like we're all a couple of flippin' creeps. Probably because you are a flippin' creep, and she has assumed, rightly, that I am by association. Was this guy in the right? Were they in the wrong? Comment down below. He made sense at some points, and then at other points he didn't. He didn't make any. He really was just ranting. I don't know that's good enough to put in the video. I'm gonna leave it in there. I think it's. How about you guys answer down below what you thought? I think he was wronged a bit too many times, and he's kind of just venting out all that frustration. But you should know that people have grown a bit socially awkward over the years. There are still tons of horrible stories you hear about people playing in game shops. I don't like playing in game shops. Most game shops I go to, every nerd in there is a freaking douchebag. I can't really blame people for not being open to inviting other people into the campaign. Let's find a better story. Can we find a horror story? Our next story comes from, oh no, it's extra long. Whatever, we need something to end this off on. Our next long story comes from the user, the mighty Anarchist, the cringe power DM. Woohoo! Power players, yeah! Guess what system? Take your time now and guess what system this story is about to be based in. Comment it down below and then watch the video and see if you were right. My friends and I moved to a new town about 2 years ago. It was slow making friends, as we had found out that making friends in your late 20s is a little hard to do. We tried making some posts for making friends via D&D, as my friend David had played quite a bit and got me and Hannah interested in the game that we would all play, and David got to practice being a DM. With weeks turning to months, we resigned to making a post in the local subreddit to see if anyone in the area was willing to play with us. We eventually stumbled onto Kevin. Kevin seemed okay at first. We would not find out until after the fact that there were a few posts on his accounts we should have looked at first. Might have saved us the trouble. Oh no, this next part, I see it. The dreaded, oh, it gives it all away. And it's the worst, oh my gosh, this story's awful. I'm just kidding. Oh no, why is it always this? On a side note, session 0, maybe? I don't know, let's find out if they did a session 0. But here it comes. We started with playing Curse of Strahd. I'd gotten it as a gift for David a couple years back, and we were never able to complete it. I thought this would be a fun module to get everyone acquainted and we would have a fun time. David was our DM and things were okay at first. The only real complaint is that Kevin never took any of the story hooks. After a few sessions, Hannah voiced that the setting was not what she had expected and asked if we could do a new campaign. She wasn't expecting Curse of Strahd to be as much as a mystery as it is, and more expected a typical D&D adventure focused on vampires. This was totally fine with David, and since I am also new to D&D, it was fine with me too. Curse of Strahd was the only module I had played, and it was all I knew about D&D. I was familiar with what Cost is about, but was also itching to try something more traditional. Kevin voiced that this could be a fun time for him to possibly DM and give David more time as a player, as that is something he has voiced in the past. We were all very enthusiastic about the change and left that final Cost session anticipating what module we would be playing next. Oh, how wrong we end up being. In retrospect, this would be the first red flag that we should have paid attention to. What? The red flag was he wanted to be a DM? Was the red flag he didn't want to play Curse of Shroud? That's a green flag, baby. If you don't want to play Curse of Shroud, good. I'm just kidding. I said this in the other video. I think Curse of Shroud is a module that can work if you go in and change things beforehand. I haven't played through it entirely, so I'm sure it's not as bad as it seems. But from what I've seen in the horror stories have read and listened to, Curse of Shroud is just doo-doo by itself, and then players make it even worse. Moving on! Kevin met up with us following the week, asking us if we had heard of Critical Role. I was vaguely familiar with it, but didn't know anything about it except that Matt Mercer was involved and was a very popular D&D thing. He's very adamant about giving it a shot. Hannah and I voiced about how we did not know anything about CR, the world, the lore, people, episodes, and that we didn't really have knowledge of D&D at all, really. We asked about starting with something basic, a classic D&D type adventure, as Hannah and I never really played one of those. We have no frame of reference for how much items cost, what towns are like in D&D, or what a typical adventure even is. He was adamant that Critical Role module had exactly what we were looking for, but wanted to stress how much cool stuff we could end up doing. We were excited to try, but were hesitant on going based off his description of the alternate feats you could take, all the crazy class stuff you can do. And he never really explained that it was not set in favor on the typical D&D setting. It was a bit overwhelming, to say at least. Hannah and David decided to roll whole new characters for the campaigns. I was getting a bit attached to my cost character, a parody of Gex the Gecko played as a kobold, and asked if it was alright if I make my character think he was teleported by Shroud. For the first half of the session, play like he thinks this is a dream before realizing he is just in a new place. His motivation then being trying to get back to his old party. He never voiced a problem with this character idea. His motivation never came to fruition. Oh, he likes Critical Role, does he? I'm sure that anyone who's ever been a fan of Critical Role has definitely never tried to make their campaigns like Critical Role. I'm sure the Matthew Mercer effect is not real. Definitely sure it's not real, and it definitely isn't going to happen here. In the first session, we wake up in the desert during a festival that rarely happens and everyone wants you to drink the water. I, in an attempt to roleplay a bit, decided Gex... Sorry, that's such a funny character concept, just having Gex the Gecko. Put him on screen! Look at this man! Look at this lizard man! As a D&D character. I mean, more power to your own. I mean, that's what you want to play. Everyone was cool with it. I think it's pretty funny, actually, so good on you. Good job. I don't know. In an attempt to roleplay a bit, decided Gex would want to get a lay of the land, so to speak, and see what the town was like. I tried to get him to get an outside view of the town, when two guards tried to immediately subdue me. I rode high well to get out of the grip, but he decided that they were still grappling me. My friends come to see the commotion and get me released. But then the entire town opens up and there's a heist or something happening with a cradle-like hole in the ground. Separately, since my character is in the process of being arrested and the town rising up on the back of a giant turtle creature, we're now split. Our characters are attacked from multiple angles and unable to reconvene. This all happens in the span of maybe 15 minutes in real time from us sitting in our chairs, and we spent the next hour and a half trying to figure out how to meet up before we could get any contest on what the festival is or any contest on what might be going on. I am all for a strong start, but this was a bit crazy for me. We end after a 2-hour combat session with a bunch of robbers, I think, and conclude to descend into a dungeon that was hiding under the town. After session 1, Hannah and I are already pretty lost in terms of what's going on, and Kevin is still playing things close to his chest. Whatever. Maybe there's a big reveal that will make everything make sense coming soon. Session 2, we climb down the ship, and after rolling a few self-checks and getting absolutely no information on what could be going on from anyone in the dungeon, go for a long shot and lie our way aboard a flying pirate ship akin to something from Treasure Planet. Most of the session is dialogue of us having to lie to people with no knowledge of who anyone is, and we spend most of the session traveling to end up in a steampunk world with people with rifles and Mad Max motorcycles. Hannah and I changed looks during some of the scenes, as this is immediately not what we were talking about when we said we wanted a classic D&D type adventure. It does end up being the town where David's character is from though, so there's some potential for story building there. Maybe context is coming after all. After some brief dismissals from the captain and first mate, who now trusts us enough to tell us where we're going, but not enough to tell us literally anything else, we met a shady orphanage owner, and Hannah immediately calls it a hag based on how they were talking and acting. Kevin did not seem to like that. The orphanage owner sends up a quest where we end up in a bar shootout with an orc and a lot of his cronies with guns. And Hana's character basically jumps on the orc and kills him solo, while David and I distract or fend off the gunmen. When we finished our quest, David and I received loot as reward, while Hana's character got nothing. We did not notice at this time, but looking back, he would do things like that. If you called out a chest was probably a mimic, which was literally 80% of the containers we found, nothing would be inside. If you were doing really well in the dungeon, suddenly there was a rule that you needed to call to check for traps during the time you were deciding to order everyone to enter a room. Things like that. The whole shifting to a Mad Max world is so funny. Can we have a classic D&D adventure? Yeah. One with motorcycles and guns. That's classic D&D. Oh, this sounds awful to be in. You know, you just want high fantasy, town-to-town adventures, and you get post-apocalyptic mad motorcycle on top of a giant turtle with flying airships, a big dungeon, a heist going on while being robbed, and having a shootout with an orc in a bar or something. This adventure's all over the place. You should have had a session 0. Who would have guessed? It would have been crazy to talk about the group expectations before you played. But a majority of this is friends with just one extra person. So, you know, sometimes you don't have session 0s with your friends. I don't have session 0s with my friends because we talk outside the game about it. So, have session 0, guys. They didn't say if they had one or not. I'm assuming they didn't. So, have session 0. After that session, we all talked, and I flat out tell him that I'm not having a good time with this campaign so far. It seems way more sci-fi than we discussed, and nowhere near the typical D&D adventure that we were wanting. He seemed receptive after some pushback at first, and we made sure he knew it was nothing about his DM style, because at the time we didn't notice some of these more glaring issues. We just wanted more of what we discussed. Plus, he said the book had areas like what we were talking about, so we didn't think it would be that big of a deal. Due to life events, we had to postpone a few sessions and ended up playing every other week for a while. We were under the impression that this was okay, and to be frank, these were things we could not skip, and D&D was very much an extracurricular for us. Other priorities take precedent over games in our lives. We thought there was something Kevin would understand, being closer in age to us, especially since weekly sessions were not something we agreed on in the first place. Things took a bit of an odd turn, however, when a few days later I received a lengthy Discord message from him stating that he felt disrespected and that he felt his time was not being taken seriously, citing the rescheduling. We apologized if he felt cited, but reiterated that these were non-negotiable events in our lives, some of which came up unexpectedly. But the shortest amount of notice we gave him for not being able to make that session was 4 days. We were under the impression that this would be ample time to give notice. He told us he was under a different set of standards and that he did not want to waste his time. It took a while, but we all ended up on good terms and a better understanding of one another. A good session 0, get the group expectations, you get to set the schedule, you can talk about all this hickory-do. Is this even a Critical Role campaign? I've only watched the first campaign, not fully, but if this is in the second or third one, I guess I gotta watch Critical Role. Jeez Louise. Moving on. During the off time of him picking something new for us, we decided to get to know him better outside of D&D. I introduced him to Magic the Gathering, and we went to our first pre-release together. Okay, depending on the time frame, I don't think you can just introduce someone to Magic the Gathering and then dump them straight into a pre-release unless you're just opening packs and not making the decks, but I assume you're making the decks because that's what a pre-release is for. Whatever, I'm a Magic the Gathering nerd. Could you guys guess? I'm so big into tabletop role-playing games, I would also play Cardboard Crack. We had dinner together a few times. One of these times, I had noticed his puzzle collection, and he had voiced to me he wished he had complete one, so I offered to cook dinner, and we would do one of his puzzles, glue it, and hang it up. I even baked a... what does that say? Oh. I even baked a ziti and brought it to his house. Family recipe, very special and delicious. This was when everything came to head. Oh, isn't that great? Oh, this is going to be a fun thing. And then, boom. David was recovering from some minor surgery, so Hana and I went over to the ziti. So Hana and I went over with the ziti to hang out and do the puzzle. I thought this was the plan, but when we got there, he seemed confused. I would want to do a puzzle. We ended up doing it anyway and got to talking about personal stuff. After some drinks, mostly him doing tequila shots and trying to convince Hana to do them with him, He divulged that he was pursuing a relationship with a married woman with a child, and that he was upset that she seemed to want to try and fix things with her husband rather than be with him, to the point of disparaging the guy for trying to fix his marriage. That really caught us by surprise. What got us more surprised was how he didn't seem to care what this would do to the child, who was around 8 at the time. Hana explained that pursuing a relationship like that sounded messy and should maybe be treated with more care. What? Hana explained that pursuing a relationship like that seemed messy and should maybe be treated with more care than just trying to sleep with this woman. His quote was, "Maybe I like it messy." He then proceeded to watch us try and do the puzzle for him for the next 3 hours, as he kept saying, "I'm not good at puzzles, I would just get in the way." My brother in Christ, why did you buy 5 of the dang things then? He also kept bringing himself down, which will come up again. We started to notice that he would make comments that he was stupid or nobody wanted to hear what he had to say. We repeatedly told him that was not the case and that we loved spending time with him. I'm used to a little bit of self-deprecation, but the bitterness in his voice made me think that he had something more angry behind it. This guy's a mess! He's a mess! He's trying to home wreck! That should already be a red flag. He's trying to home wreck and he doesn't care, and you guys just keep playing with him. I mean, is that common? I don't know. You guys tell me down below. I would have just snipped this guy out already. He's trying to home wreck. That's just douchebaggery by default. There's still some... Okay, let's keep moving on. Our first session in the new campaign started out fine. We all rolled new characters at level 3 and were told we were starting in what amounted to a small fishing village. We were ordered to clear out a goblin cave and collect his ears. I'm just kidding. Slay all the fantasy goblins you want, because you can never slay the real thing. Simple enough and a great start to what we were talking about with the classic D&D experience. But this is where the majority of the problems arise. For starters, David's character never seemed to get a chance to roll for traps. Kevin would ask for saves so fast nobody had time to react. Before we had mentioned that we wanted to move forward, we would say what order everyone was in, David usually taking the front. Then he would say, "Okay, roll for dex." A log you didn't see starts swinging towards you. He also made every chest in the cave a mimic with nothing inside, and these were not short encounters either. We went down probably 3 times to traps and goblins, with David's character taking almost twice the health total over the course of one session. We never had this much trouble in Curse of Strahd, and from what I know that the campaign is supposed to be on the harder side. We make the call to leave the dungeon before we could clear completely. We made it back to town and rest. The next day we head back into the cave in the morning, and David's character almost goes down from the same traps. The goblins had re-trapped the whole cave overnight, and when David tried to call, to check for traps, he felt all of them. Despite David pointing out that he was here yesterday and got hit by all these traps. So he should maybe know where a couple of them are. But the roll for success was very high for these traps in the dungeon for level 3 characters. David was rolling 15, so could still not see them. Finally, we hear a group of them in the next room, so we decide to beat them at their own game. We tie a trip rope and make a noise to get their attention to trip them. We had to remind Kevin 3 times about the trap, which we rolled very well to set quickly and quietly, and so had to fight with him for it to have any effect. He told us one of the goblins set themselves on fire and hauled towards us, but after finally relenting that our trap should do something, it failed a dex save and went prone. He still seemed upset by the fact that he let our characters do anything. But we pressed on and found the next room, filled to the brim with goblins and a bugbear brute. After pulling out every possible shenanigan to win this fight and having the position while outnumbered against ranged goblins and cover, we kill enough of them that the leader runs deeper into the cave. Out of health, spell slots, and patience, we left and headed back for another long rest. We ended that session just after defeating the goblins. Yep, this is going down wrong, guys. Clearly, the problem is the high DCs for everything, clearly. It's definitely not talking about what kind of campaign this was going to be beforehand in a session 0. Moving on. Everything came to a head at the beginning of our next session. He does not have a car, so David and I have been giving him rides, or he would call an Uber. Hana didn't like how her character was coming out, so, and it only being session 3, wrote a new character and asked Kevin if she could use her for this session. He said that he was excited to see the new character, and she took the sign as it was okay. Things started off badly though when he started making passive-aggressive comments towards me. This is going to turn out that this guy wants to get with Hana. Is that what's... Making a prediction here, I think that's what's going to happen. He might either do it outside of game subtly or in game unsubtly. That's just my prediction. Comment down below if I'm wrong. For example, when he said he had mercenaries be rude to David's character, and my character said he doesn't respect them, under his breath he said, I don't think you respect anybody. He didn't seem to like that we didn't want to deal with these rude mercenaries and started getting mad at us as players, saying he doesn't know what to prepare since he doesn't know when we are going to change our minds about what we want from him or what characters we are going to play at a moment's notice. Hana never stepped out while he and I talked. I tried explaining that I did not realize that he was making a whole new story from scratch. I was under the impression you could change the setting on a module but keep the story intact, which is what I thought had happened since we were starting to do this new campaign after the desert one. I apologize for the misunderstanding, but he did not want to drop it. David and Hana returned, and Hana tried to de-escalate the situation by explaining that our comments about our characters or the setting was not an attack on him, and that we felt he was possibly taking some of these things personally when they were not aimed that way at all. He decided to start accusing Hana of being alcoholic for having a glass of wine during the session, and that he wished someone would speak to her the way she speaks to other people, in reference to having to reschedule D&D and making new characters that we asked if we could play with. It was at this point we asked him to leave, blocked him where we could, and we had not seen him since. I think you should have stopped. I was wrong, by the way. I hope I'm wrong. There's still another paragraph or so of this. But anyways, I think you should have started at the home wrecking. I think the home wrecking was a very clear red flag, but to each their own. We're gonna finish this off now. After everything went down, Hana found a Reddit account that we had originally met him through, found a post and a Critical Role sub that sounded oddly familiar. It stated by accusing everyone in the sub of not liking the show at all and having no respect for the Critical Role team, because there was people that were posting criticism of some of the actions, the characters, or storyline in Campaign 3. This was, we found out through the comments on the post, one of the CR subs that were formed because negative or critical posts on the main sub often got deleted a lot. So he had gone to the sub, specifically created for that reason, and decided that they were all too negative and not respecting Critical Role the way they deserve. Weird behavior in general, but it lined up perfectly with his comments about respecting his time, which he talked about a lot more than I mentioned here, and his inability to hear feedback on how we could have joined the game more. This has not soured our taste for D&D and reinvigorated David's love for DMing. And we're finally getting the classic adventure we were hoping to finally start. Oh, sorry, that was the end of it. OPs did the right thing in cutting the guy off early. I'm glad that guy wasn't trying to home wreck Hana and OP's relationship. I really thought that's what the story was going with, the mention of everything that was happening at the dinner and the sudden splurge. And then when he started making passive-aggressive comments towards OP's character, and then it seemed like he was going to do something towards Hana's character, but it ended up not happening like that, and I'm very grateful. They did the right thing in cutting the guy out of the situation. I think I would have done it at the home wrecking part, but again, to each their own. It was nice to actually read an actual horror story. So, you know, concluding notes, have session 0. That's it. Comment down below what was your favorite part or least favorite part. And see you guys. Oh, wait, I don't say that. Have a lop of a day. Goo goo goo.